Good evening, everyone. All right, so for this topic of functions, we started by looking at some questions where they basically gave us a functions question, right? So they gave us a function equal to something. So let's say they gave us this one. Right, so let's say they gave us f of x was equal to 2x divided by 7. And let's say they told you to find f of 3. Now, basically, all we had to do was everywhere we had x, you had to replace it with what was in the brackets that they gave us. So in this case, everywhere I had x, I replaced it with 3. Right? So I like to box everything. So what I like to do is I like to box everything that the x has in the original function. And then in the second one, I replace it with a box and place what was in that box into each box. Now remember, this is 2x. It's attached through multiplication. So I'm going to have to multiply these two, which makes it 2 3s are 6 over 7. So basically what this is telling me is that when x is 3, f of x, which is your y, at that position, or f of 3, is 6 over 7. Now we're going to look at a part of it known as a function of a function or a composite function. Basically, when you have a composite function, you have a function within another function. So let's say they gave you f of g of 1. Right? So let's say they gave you that f of x is equal to x plus 5. And let's say they said that g of x was equal to 3x minus 1. And let's say they told us find f of g of 1. Now, anytime you have something like this, what you want to do is you want to look at what is the first function. So your first function or the first letter is basically the function into which you're going to substitute everything else. Right? So because f was first, that's the function that we're going to substitute into. So remember, it comes like you're replacing all of the x's with a box. Now, what is in that box? In that box is g of 1. So basically, you want to know what is f of g of 1. So everywhere you had x, you want to put what is g of 1. Did I lose anybody with this part?
No, miss.
All right. So basically, I need to figure out what is g of 1. So in order to find g of 1, I have to substitute g of x is equal to 3x minus 1 with g of 1, which is everywhere I have x, I have to put 1. Oops, I put minus instead. So g of 1 is actually 3 ones are 3 minus 1, which is 2. So g of 1 has a value of 2. So what that simply means is that where I had g of 1, I could put 2 because g of 1 is 2. Right, so f of g of 1 is the same as f of 2, and that will be 2 plus 5, which is 7. And I would kind of good evening. All right, so Jaden, I have Jaden 4, and Jaden is that Jaden without the y, your Taylor rule, right? Right, so okay, awesome. All right, so Jaden, what we're doing is we're doing a very important topic that always comes in mathematics, always, right? It has a section just for this in our mathematics, and that is known as functions and relations. Now, when it comes to functions and relations, you are basically substituting, right? So I'm going to go back a bit and then move forward to this one. So let's say they gave us something like this. They told us that f of x is equal to x plus 5, right? So the first step is they might ask, okay, find f of 4. Simply, if you're given something like this, everywhere I once had x, I'm going to replace it with a box. So where I once had my x, I'm going to replace it with a box. So everywhere I have x, I'll replace it with what's in the box. So it's like you're just substituting. So they asked me for f of 4. So everywhere I have x, I'll replace it with 4, and then I solve like normal. 4 plus 5, that will be 9. Now, what we got to is what is known as a composite function or a function of a function. Now, when it comes to composite functions or functions of a function, it's basically where you are going to substitute one function into another. So let's say they told us that f of x was equal to x plus 5 and g of x is equal to 3x minus 1, right? So this is a second part to the same question here. Now, basically, you see your first letter, that is like your template function. That is like your function that you're going to substitute into, right? So you write that first one. Now, everywhere I have x, I'm going to replace it with a box. Right, so it's like I'm replacing the x's with boxes. And in that box, I'll put what they have inside of it. So you see where x was supposed to be, they have f of 4. So I'm going to replace here with f of 4. Now, what is f of 4? Right? Because I could find out what is f of 4. Remember, f was x plus 5. So everywhere I have x, I am going to put 4. Right? So into the main function, which is f of x was equal to x plus 5, everywhere I have x, I am going to put 4. So 5 plus 4 is 9. So remember up here we had g of f of 4 was equal to, wherever I had x, I substituted or replaced it with f of 4, sorry. So everywhere I see f of 4 has a value of 9. So I will replace that with 9. Right? So everywhere I had f of 4, I'll just replace it with 9 because f of 4 is 9. So I solve it then. 9 3s are 27 minus 1, which is 27 minus 1, and that's 26. So basically, g of f of 4 is the same as g of 9, which is equal to 26. All right, so they gave us the same thing, except they asked us to find g of f of 0. Again, your first function letter is like your template, right? So that's the one that you're going to substitute into, right? So remember, you have g of x is equal to 3x minus 1. So everywhere I have x, I'm going to replace it with a box. And in that box, you're going to put what you have on the side of it. So they want f of 0 in that box. Now, we need to figure out what is f of 0. Right? Remember, f of x was x plus 5. So everywhere I have x, I'm going to replace it with a 0. So f of 0 will be 5. So that means into this, if f of 0 is 5, it means that everywhere I have f of 0, I'll substitute 5. And then we solve like normal. 5 3s are 15 minus 1, so it's going to be 40. All right, so they could even give us things like g of 10. Right, so remember, you look at the first function, and that's going to be a main function that you're going to substitute into, which is g of x is equal to 3x minus 1. Everywhere you have x, you're going to replace it with a box. And in that box, I'll put what is next to it, which is g of 10. So I could figure out what is g of 10. Now, basically, g of 10 is wherever I have x in the g of x, I'm going to replace it with 10. So that will become 3 times 10, which is 30, minus 1, which is 29. So in this, where I had g of 10, I could replace it with the value of g of 10, which is 29. So this will become 3 times 29. And I got 87 minus 1. So that will be 86. All right, so using the same example, let's try for me f of 2. All right, so we could pause for a little while on the recording and we're trying f of 2. Right, so they asked us to find f of 2. So remember, the first letter is the one that you're going to input into. So we want f of x. So that's f of x is equal to x plus 5. So everywhere I have x, I'm going to replace it with a box. And in that box, we want f of 2. So in the box, we want to put f of 2 into it. So we need to figure out what is f of 2. So f of 2 was basically that everywhere I had x, I'm going to put 2. So that would have been 2 plus 5, which is 7. So we're going to replace f of 2 with 7, because f of 2 is 7. So that will become 7 plus 5, which is 12. Very good, those of you who got it. Let's try another one, a different time. So let's say they gave us of x is equal to x squared plus 7. G of x is equal to 3x minus 8. And h of x is equal to x over 4. Right, so they gave us this. So you'll see given that, and then they asked us to find f of g of 3. So remember, your first function, that's the one you're going to input into. So you're going to write that one. F of x is equal to x squared plus 7. And where I have x, I'm going to replace it with a box. Then, where I once had that box, I'm going to replace it with g of 3. So everywhere I have x, I'm going to put g of 3. Now, what is g of 3? On the side, I could find g of 3, which simply means that everywhere I have x in g of x, I am going to replace the x with 3. So I'll end up with 3 3s are 9 minus 8. That's 1. So g of 3 is 1. So everywhere I have g of 3, I will replace it with 1. So this will become 1 squared, which is 1, plus 7, which is 8. Look at this one. So using the same functions that they gave us, they asked us to find h of f of 5. Right? So basically, we just separated with the roots of h of f of 5. Now, your first function tells me that's like a template. That's what you want to substitute into. So you write that one down. Now, everywhere that we have x, I'm going to replace it with a box. And in that box, I'll put what they have next to it, which in this case is f of 5. So everywhere I have x, I am going to replace it with f of 5. Now I could figure out what is f of 5, right? We could find out what is f of 5. Remember, f of x was x squared plus 7. We got that from what they gave us. So f of 5 will be 5 squared plus 7. Of course, you could use the calculator once it's paper 2 or paper 3. Right, so 5 5s are 25 plus 7, and we got 32. So f of 5 is 32. So everywhere I have f of 5, I could replace that with 32. So I'll end up with 32 divided by 4, and that's 8. So h of 32, which is the same as h of f of 5, is 8. All right, so let's say they told us the function f is such that f of x is equal to 3x minus 8. And they asked you to solve f of x equals to 7. Now, remember before, where we had x was being replaced by the value, whatever number it was, right? So we actually had x being replaced with a specific number in the set brackets. But for this one, they said f of x is equal to 7. So it's like basically for this one, they're telling me that y is equal to 7, because remember we told you that f of x is actually y. So in this case, they're saying that y is actually 7, and they want you to find out the value of x, right? So in this case, they told me that f of x is equal to this, and they said that f of x is equal to this. So in other words, this is equal to this. Right, so for this one, it's different to this one, because this one, we had to substitute where we had the value of x with whatever was inside of the brackets. This was a substitution. But for this one is the whole of f of x is equal to this, which means what f of x is, which is this, is equal to this. So from here, what you do is you're going to work or solve like regular algebra. And remember, in solving algebra, your goal is to find out what is the value of the unknown by carrying everything else across the equal sign. And once you cross the equal sign, you're going to do the opposite operation. So this was minusing. So when it goes across, it's going to become adding. 7 add 8, that will be 15. I want to get x alone, so I'll get rid of this x. So it's going to become 15 over 3. So x is equal to 5. So in other words, they're telling me that they want me to find f of x, which in this case is like y. So it's telling me that when y is 7, x is 5. Let's look at another one. Let's say they told us that given that h of x is equal to 5x minus 1 over 2. Now, if they told me find h of 2, then that means everywhere I have x, I will replace it with 2. So this will become 5 2s are 10 minus 1 over 2, which will be 10 minus 1, that's 9 over 2. 2 could go into 9 4 times, it will remain of 1 over 2. That's if I was looking for h of 2. Where x was, I substituted it. But let's say they gave me that h of x is equal to the same 5x minus 1 over 2. But they said to solve h of x is equal to 32. Now remember, this is h of x, and h of x is equal to 32. So in other words, this is equal to 32. So following algebra, I could solve this, right? So you're gonna carry across the 2. It was dividing, so when it goes across, it becomes multiplying. So I end up with 32 times 2, which is 64. Then I have to carry this across. It was minusing. So when it goes across, it becomes adding. So we have 64 plus 1, which would be 65. And then I want x alone. So I'm going to carry across the 5, which was multiplying. So when it goes across, it's going to become dividing. So 65 divided by 5, that would be 30. All right, so let's say they told us g of x is equal to 19 minus 4x. They could tell us to find g of 2. Now, if they tell us to find g of 2, it means that everywhere we have x, we're going to replace x with 2. So that will become 19 minus 4 2s are 8. So 19 minus 8 would be 11. But let's say they told us that the function g of x is equal to the same 19 minus 4x. But this time, they told us to find g of x is equal to 31. Now, what they are saying here is that g of x is this, but g of x is equal to 31. So you're basically saying that this is equal to this. So in order to solve this, you're going to solve like a regular algebraic sum. So I'm going to carry across the 19. When it goes across, it was adding. So when it goes across, it's going to do the opposite, which is minusing. Right? Remember, the operation is always in front. So it becomes 31 minus 19, and I got negative 4x is equal to 12. Now, negative 4x is equal to 12. So when I carry this across, remember that negative 4 was attached to the x through multiplication. So when I carry it across, it's going to do the opposite operation, which was division. Right? So the sign on it didn't change because what changed was the multiplication into the division. So remember, you're going to divide like normal. 12 divided by 4 is 3. But because you have two different signs, it's going to be negative 3. All right, so the next part is that of the inverse of a function. Now, anytime they ask you for an inverse of a function, it is represented like this. So you might see f inverse of x, or you might see g inverse of x. Right, so anytime you see this symbol, that basically means they want the inverse of the function. And in order to find the inverse of a function, you're going to have to remember that you need to lick. Right, so you're going to remember to lick, where L means you're going to let y equal to the function. I means to interchange x and y, which simply means where you have x, you'll put y, and where you have y, you'll put x. And then lastly, you're going to change the subject. Right, so you're going to change the subject of the formula, or basically make y the subject of the formula. All right, so let's say they gave us a function such as this one. So let's say they told you f of x is equal to 2x minus 3. And they asked you to find f inverse of x. Now, anytime they give you something like this, remember that you're going to lick. So you could write LIC down your page. L means you're going to let y equal to the function. Right? So remember, this was f of x. Remember, initially we did say f of x, g of x, h of x was y. Right? So it's like you're replacing the f of x or g of x or h of x with y instead. So instead of f of x, you're going to write y is equal to 2x minus 3. Next step is you're going to interchange. So everywhere you have y, I'll put x. And everywhere you see x, I'll put y. Right, so just put in x where you see y and y where you see x. Then you're going to change the subject, meaning you're going to make y the subject of the formula. Or you're trying to get y is equal to something. So what you're going to do is you're going to carry everything else across the equal sign until you get y alone on one side. So I'll bring across the -3. It was minusing. So when it comes across, it becomes adding. Right, so when I brought across the -3, I got x plus 3 is equal to 2y, and I want y alone. So I'm going to carry across the 2. It was attached to the y through multiplication. So when it goes across, it's going to do the opposite, which is divide. So this will be equal to y. All I did was I swapped the y in front. Now they never asked us for y is equal to, they asked us for f inverse. But once you do these steps, what you just found is the inverse. So you just replace the y back with the f inverse. So f inverse, of this function would be x plus 3 divided by 2. All right, so let's say they asked us, or they gave us, f of x is equal to 4x over 9 minus 8. And they asked us firstly to find f inverse of x. Now, once you see to find f inverse of x, remember to lick L-I-C. Basically, L means you're going to let y equal to the function. So instead of it saying f of x, you're going to have y is equal to what the function is, which is 4x over 9 minus 8. The second step is the I, which means to interchange. Interchanging x and y means everywhere you see y, I'll put x, and everywhere I have x, I will put y. Last step, I'm going to change the subject, which simply means that I want to get y is equal to something. Right, so remember they gave us, or we have, x is equal to 4y over 9 minus 8. I just rewrote this. And I want to get y alone. So I'm going to start with the one furthest away. Once I cross the equal sign, I'm going to do the opposite. So this was minusing. So when it goes across, it becomes adding. So it becomes x plus 8 is equal to 4y over 9. Then this was dividing. So when it goes across, it becomes multiplying. So basically, I have to multiply everything here by 9. Right? So I'm going to multiply this by 9. I could get rid of that bracket. So everything inside, I'll multiply it. So I'll have that 9x plus 8 times 9. Eight times 9, that's 72, is equal to 4y. But I want y alone. So I'm going to get rid of the 4, which was attached to multiplication. So when I bring it across, everything that is on this side will be divided by 4. Right, so all I'm going to do now is just put in the y in front. But remember, when we get the y here, this is the inverse. So what you'll have is that f inverse of x, I just replace the y now with f inverse of x, because that's what you just found, is equal to 9x plus 72 all over 4. Right, so recapping that, in order to find the inverse, we first let y equal to the function. Interchange your x and your y. So where you have y, you'll put x. Wherever you have X, you put Y. Then they're going to solve for Y basically, or make Y the subject. So I'll carry across the 8 first, it was minusing on this side. So when it comes across, it becomes adding. I brought across the 9 because it was dividing. So when it goes across, everything on this side will be multiplied by that 9. Then I'll bring across the 4, which was multiplying. So when it comes across, it becomes divided. Now they could take you a bit further. They might ask you, okay, find f inverse of negative 10. Now we know what is f inverse of x. Remember, we found that as 9x plus 72 all over 4. So just as we did initially in the very start, I could substitute wherever I have x with what's in the brackets, and that's going to be negative 10. Right, so I could substitute just as I did before. So if I have to substitute this, I'll have 9 times the negative 10, which will be negative 90, plus the 72 over 4, negative 90 plus the 72, you subtract like normal, keep this kind of a bigger number. So I got 18, negative 18 over 4. Sorry. Then 4 could go into negative 18. 4 could go into 18 4 times. Right, that's 16. And 2 over 4. Or in other words, because the 2 over 4 could be reduced to a half. So it's going to be negative 4 and a half. Right, so I'm just drawing a little division here. Right, so on this side, we found the inverse, and then they took it further and they asked us to find the inverse of negative 10, which is basically substitute negative 10 everywhere that you see x in f inverse of